Anyway, you cannot do it because even they know that you don't have no place to stay. They kick you out at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and even if it's raining or if it's whatever, you can stay in the bus station because you are not bringing them no money at all. And here everything is that, money. A lot of people in the street are not in the street because they are bad people. They're in the street because the system pushed them to that situation, you know.
I've been out here on the streets a long time since I come home from Vietnam. I've been out here on the streets. I was disabled when I got out of Vietnam, and I've been fighting the government for 20-some years.
Rent out here is cheap. Rent out here is too much for anybody. DA don't even cover rent. And about living in the hotels like on 6th Street, drug offenses, just stabbings, shootings, it's not worth it at all.
So where do you usually sleep?
I was either sleep in the park or go down to some shelters in San Mateo whenever I get a chance to get down there.
Police, they don't help you. They don't. They kick you. So they saw me twice walking around here, and they put me against the wall. They search me. They why are you doing here? Maybe I asked him if, you know, the color of my skin has anything to do with this.
You sit and hold the sign, it's okay. But they've got the aggressive ones, with people who follow you down the street. Like, you know, they've got a law against that.
Many homeless people, especially the ones that I deal with out in TL, do get general assistance checks. That is a maximum amount of $347 per month. Older gentlemen may also get a Social Security check or an SSI check. That might bring their total as high as $718 per month. It is virtually impossible to find a hotel room for less than $80 a week. Therefore, the cost of the hotel room is greater than the income from general assistance. That's going to put you back out on the street at least a week after you get your check, regardless of whether or not you spend it on food or you spend it on drugs or alcohol or whatever your thing is. So there's a cycle of dependency and need between getting your check, getting a hotel room for a few days, and by that point you're so stressed out from living on the streets that a certain amount of your check is going to go towards food you might not otherwise have, or alcohol or drugs, and then you'd be back on the street for the remainder of the 2-week period till checks come out again. I know that the shelter that I work at, we see that cycle in terms of the level of violence and, you know, where people are at in their heads at the shelter depending on the day of the month.
When people talk about numbers of say like 8,000 homeless, there's a whole other category of what you could call near homeless, or people on the verge of homelessness, people who are like just barely able to hang on to residential hotel rooms, which is kind of the last resort for affordable housing in the city, and the number of people who are doubling up. I mean, that has, I forget what the figure is exactly, but the last census showed that number of people doubling up, according to how the census defines it, went up by like 50%. And it's people, more and more people are just squeezing 2 people into 1-bedroom apartments, 3 people into 2-bedroom apartments. And, you know, many of the people, the difference between somebody who is homeless and on the streets and somebody who is living with a friend is often just a simple difference, such as that friend had a spare small room or a living room that they were willing to let you sleep on the couch on, Sometimes the difference between being on the street and being doubled up is just a matter of luck more than. The average two-bedroom rent in San Francisco is over $1,000 to rent a brand new place, and if you're working even a full-time job at minimum wage, you're basically not going to be able to pay that rent. Not even going to be able to pay that rent. Never mind have money for food or anything like that. And if you the number of part-time jobs has gone way up in recent years, so. Even if you're making a decent wage, working 20 hours a week, then that's the same as a minimum wage job.
In the 1970s, when I was a tenant union organizer here in the late 1970s, there were only a few thousand homeless people. The housing stock in San Francisco for an urban center was among the cheapest of cities in the United States in terms of rental costs. Nowadays, it's obviously one of the most expensive. There were only a few thousand homeless then. I would say now there's over 30,000 homeless people. So.
San Francisco right now has a relatively high vacancy rate, up around 6% of the apartments are for rent at this point, compared with past years when it's been down as low as 1 or 2%. I think partially that's because the rents are so high. People are increasingly moving out of San Francisco. If you can't afford the rents, you can go across the bay. You can go into Oakland and get a similar place for sometimes almost half the cost. And so more and more people of moderate income, working people are finding that they have to move out of San Francisco. Landlords will keep the places vacant rather than lowering the rent to attract new tenants, because they know that eventually those tenants will come back and that they'll have to go through years to try to get the rents up to where they are right now.
I work at Multi-Service Center North. That's at 1001 Polk and Geary. Our shelter capacity for men is approximately 100, for women approximately 100. These are in beds. On any given night, about 50% of those beds are case-managed beds, which means you have a bed there for 6 months at a time. The services of a case manager, substance abuse clinic, mental health clinic. At present, there is no direct employment assistance. If you're on GA, you will give a certain percentage of your money to your case manager, who will bank it for you until you get out. The idea is to put you back in the housing market with job skills to let you run. The other 50% of the beds are given away nightly by lottery. People will get a ticket in the morning, they'll come back and check their ticket. If their ticket won, they get a bed, they get dinner, they get breakfast. Gentlemen may also get a shot at a floor space and a blanket for the night. We give that away by lottery as well. People put 90 people on the floor every night, and that's a hard floor, believe me. Try sleeping on a floor with a thin blanket. I'm not talking even an army blanket. I'm talking a thin square of woven nylon. I guess most days we give away about 350 tickets for men and about 75 tickets for women.
More men are homeless.
Why do you think that is?
Well, maybe because women have a little more precious commodity than, no, what am I saying?
one paycheck away from homelessness. Why is that? You're working 40 hours, man. If I've worked for 40 years and then I fell off a ladder and got hurt and I'm on disability, SSI, and GA, how come I still can't afford a house to live in? How come I still can't get treatment for my substance abuse problem that's keeping me on the streets? How many paychecks away are you from being homeless? Exclude family or friends whom you could rely on. How many paychecks are you away? One? How many paychecks are you away? One? How many paychecks are you away? One?
The first generation of squatting that I saw in San Francisco was what I saw in the summer of 1978, and then I permanently moved here in January 79. And at that particular time, there was a group called the White Panther Party located on the lower blocks of Cole Street in the Haight-Ashbury. The White Panthers began squatting in that neighborhood in the early 1970s. Their political program was a complete replication of the Black Panther Party program in Oakland and in other urban centers of the United States. They were democratic centralist with different forms of parliamentarian strains of activity and so on and so forth. And what they did in the Haight-Ashbury is they took over several buildings that were unaccountably possessed, if you like, or owned by absentee landlords. These buildings were inhabited at that particular time by masses of junkies, masses of unorganizable homeless people who the White Panthers, like their Black Panther counterparts, would call the lumpens. So what the White Panthers did, and they believed in armed struggle as well as being parliamentarians and democratic centralists, they took over these buildings, kicked out the junkies, and laid claim and started barricading themselves inside of it. And in order to create an authentic, if not organic, relationship with the neighborhood around them, again, like their Black Panther counterparts, they created food distribution programs in the Haight-Ashbury as well as other parts of the city that had neighborhoods where constituencies of very poor people lived. They distributed food at cost, wholesale food, thus creating a base of support for their program much larger than the essential occupation of the buildings that they inhabited and occupied in the Haight-Ashbury. They also tried to defend their position in these buildings through legal claim. I would not say they were homesteaders because they were not legally trying to lay claim to the building, but they defended their right as squatters to retain occupation and possession of these buildings through the usage of the San Francisco court system. What made the White Panthers different or distinct in terms of their social appeal was that they were working class. The leadership was working class and the cadre was working class because, like the Black Panther Party, they appealed directly to the same kind of class that they sprang from, as the Black Panthers called it, the lumpen proletariat. That in society which was completely organizable, those people who sprang from a working class background, who had dropped out of the working class milieu that they were born into, who were on the streets, homeless, who were out of the prisons, who were ex-drug addicts, who were what we would call of an outlaw nature in this society. We're no longer recuperable into mainstream dominant cultural matrices. Squatters Anonymous began in November of '82, and their activities became more public exactly 10 years ago in the month of February 1983, with a series of several public occupations in the Haight-Ashbury. One particular building was now, you can see it at the corner of Haight and Masonic. The southeastern corner of Haight and Masonic was the building. The upper floors were completely occupied in a mass public media occupation of which hundreds of police came. Dozens and dozens of journalists came, and hundreds of potential squatters and squatter supporters. This was what I would call the beginning of squatting mediafication, or if you like, the mediafication of squatting. From the spring of 1983 until the end of 1984, various and sundry squats of an anti-authoritarian, punk, anarchist persuasion sprang up in San Francisco, in the Mission District, in the Haight-Ashbury, and in the south of Market. The most successful elements that were able to sustain their activity occurred in the south of Market. And the second generation of squatting tended to lend itself in constituency towards a more obvious affluent class nature, which was, you could see that there were a lot of middle-class dropout kids coming to have an adventure in poverty in San Francisco. The mediafication of the second generation of squatting, which was very interesting because most of these people, as anarchists or of an anti-authoritarian persuasion, they were definitely children of the television generation, and they couldn't separate political activity from the imagification of that political activity. It was hard to discern what was more important to this generation, the experience or the image of their very own activity. It was hard to discern what they got more pleasure out of, doing the act or seeing their acts recorded and becoming an image on television. It was hard to discern what was more powerful, the act of occupying a building or seeing yourself on news late at night occupying the very same building. What became more important, yourself as a political component acting in an extra-legal fashion against the entire system of capital, or seeing yourself on television being described as such? This created the collapse of many squats. There was leadership and cadre within the White Panther Party. There was a sense of democratic centralism, creates a hierarchical nature in an internal organization. You have your leadership, you have your cadre, and obviously there's a pyramidal effect where power is coming from the top and being disseminated to the baseline, to the cadre who follow the orders that the leadership devises in all of its wisdom to hand down. The second generation attempted a sense of collectivism politically, as a political program which manifested itself in a social and in a daily sense as a form of communalism. And I think what we would call the tactic of gaining an understanding in that collective sense was through the usage of consensus. In the long term, the White Panthers, their lifespan as squatters, as armed squatters, standing up against every element, every form of authority that the city was throwing at them, both in the courts, on the streets, and in every other context, they were the most successful. Whether I agreed with what they were doing ideologically and organizationally is a completely separate issue, but they were very public, they were very successful. If for nothing else, that their lifespan was obvious to the people in the neighborhood, to the people in the city, to the powers that control the city. The White Panthers literally, forgive the pun, stuck by their guns. The second generation, for lack of an organized political program, they came and went like the wind. The sense of commitment to squatting as part of a program of overall struggle against capital, against the free open marketplace of housing, and which in turn was creating so many homeless people, that was far less successful.
We are taking over abandoned buildings to protest real estate profiteering and the resulting pain of
We took over the first building and we started planning for the public takeover of a building on Thanksgiving Day. That generated a huge amount of publicity and attention. And then we immediately started planning to take houses covertly every week. At a regularly scheduled meeting, we'd all go out afterwards and put a bunch of people into a house. And then we planned the above-ground actions, which were the public protests, which we also carried out on Christmas, and that was a siege for several days, like 2 days. We have at least, 2 buildings, maybe 3 buildings right now, and they've existed for quite some time, for maybe like over a month and a half now. The meetings themselves have had from maybe a low of about 30 to up to like 65 and 70 people. So it's a pretty large number of individuals, and then the people in the buildings themselves, frequently not very many of them come to the meetings. So, well, I think a lot of the people that we're housing are kind of a different population than those people that are organizing. And the people that are being housed have people that have been living on the streets a long time, and their interests are being housed and not so much in organizing and collective activity. And I think they're typical of the average Americans in that they don't have a background of political organizing or a point of view that there is something that people can do socially to ultimately result in bettering their lives. They're not seeing their lives as being affected by overall societal patterns. They just see themselves having no money, no place to live, and they see their own personal problems. And so they're tackling the situation on that. And I think it's kind of frustrating on some levels, although I would have to say that the percentage of people in the squats that are politicized is increased, and the percentage of people that are politicized that are living on the streets in general, eating at Food Not Bombs, that are becoming more politically sophisticated, that has increased over the years. And the media in America it's corporate owned, and they have their interests, and they've been relatively nice to Homes Not Jails and has given us relatively sympathetic coverage. I mean, they could have been painting us as total outlaws stealing sacred private property, and they really haven't done that. And I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that there is no really ideological point of view that people are able to attach themselves to, even in the mainstream at this point. You know, basically, a lot of the pretense that capitalism was obviously the best type of economic system, that ownership of private land was clearly that was sacrosanct, as the former, mayor's coordinator for homeless said. They're really, the ruling class isn't that totally clear on what it's going to do. It hasn't come up with an idea itself for housing homeless that has resulted in homeless people being housed. And so I think they've treated us very, very nice, relatively fairly. But I think Homes Not Jails itself is we've gotten so much media, it's kind of been a drag on the group on some levels. As while it has pulled in a lot of people and we have a large name recognition, a lot of people understand exactly the principle we're trying to get across, which I think that is really great. Our meetings have tended to focus on debates around the media. And in fact, up until last week, there was like a real drain on our meetings and a real drain on our ability to organize to deal with issues of drugs in the squats, or with expanding the clandestine parts of our program, or even getting started on any kinds of trying to take over buildings that are so bad off that we need to get grants to fix them. Basically, so far we've raised $50 since October, and we still have like half people living in 3 houses, and we've actually housed more people than the city and county of San Francisco has in that period of time with our $50.
I don't know who started Homes Not Jails or when. I came into the organization about 2.5 months ago. And the way that I found out about the organization was very simple. There was a flyer posted at the shelter. So I took the number down and I called it, and I went to the next several meetings. And this was something that, I thought was extremely important. It's important to me for a number of reasons. One, I'm a substance abuse addict and formerly homeless myself. spent a considerable period of time on the streets using, and I know about the cycles of use and dependency that are involved. 2, I work with homeless people every day, man. I have to be hard with them. I have to be hard with my brothers on the street and say, I'm sorry, sir, but we do not have any room tonight. Or even worse than that, I have to say, I'm sorry, sir, you did not play our lottery. You did not call at 10:15 to find out if we have space. I have to turn you away. You're 65 years old and it's raining out. Homes Not Jails is an organization which, if you look at it, is on the face of it a consensually run organization. That means it is run by an ultra-democratic process. I say on the face of it because it is and it is not actually run this way. And that's because there are different action groups within Homes Not Jails that commit themselves to specific actions and then go out and do them. Now, those actions are not necessarily individually approved by the group, nor are the action groups specifically set up as action group committees with group sanction. So certain kinds of decisions get submitted to the group and other certain kinds of actions get taken by individuals in the group. It's really very much like that old Marxist dictum, from each according to his needs to each according to his means, or something like that. You know, it operates on what skills you have and where you put yourself and what you can do and who you are than any kind of set roles, you know. If there was a legal instrument that said all you have to do is live in abandoned structures for a year, pay the taxes, pay the utility bills, and you own it, then we would have power. Then you would see a lot fewer vacant buildings because landlords would be scared that we would be taking them. But, you know, every one of these houses that we have now, don't fool yourself, the landlord swears out a trespassing warrant. The people in those houses will be evicted, will be removed at 3 in the morning, and they will hear the policeman at the door. You know, we don't have the power to deter that yet. We've come to negotiated compromises with some owners, and we're living in the vacuum of they don't know what's going on. Well, I think some of them they don't know. I think some of them they owe too much money. I think some of them don't care anymore about the housing. Those are our ideal sorts of squats.
You know, one of the most exciting things about it has been that the homeless people, I like to call them previously homeless people who are in Homes Not Jails, are the ones who are doing most of the work these days. When new buildings opened up, it's people from the squats who are doing most of that work, who are actually breaking into buildings, who are actually turning on the utilities, who are helping support new squats. You know, we will have a new squat will be opened up, and somebody from one of the oldest squats will go over to that squat and help them get on the gas, or help them turn on the electricity. I've also had situations where the police have come, and the people who have been in the squat have been savvy enough to deal with the police and say, look, come on in and take a look around. Yeah, we're not supposed to be here, but this place used to be a crack house, and look at how we fixed it up. And having the police tour and seeing that now there's furniture there and people have lights and, you know, they're reading books, and the police, the same police have been in there like a month ago and saw people smoking crack and saw needles and just trash and all that stuff. And in those cases, the police have chosen not to call the landlord or anybody, but to just let the people live there. I think a lot of our support in the community has come because people saw that we weren't just marching, we weren't just like protesting in front of City Hall, but we were actually taking people off the streets and putting them into housing, and we were making a political point, but at the same time we were actually doing something about it.
Some squats are totally organized. We've had organized squats where we had squat meetings, and it ran smooth. We had like 40 people living in one building, and we had like squat meetings, and we had rules, but it wasn't like, they weren't like Nazi rules. It wasn't like no drinking, or no, you could do your own thing. You just couldn't interfere with other people doing their own thing. It was really cool. It worked really well, and it was weird because at that point it was like 40% junkies and the rest were all alcoholics, and we all got along. I mean, people fought, but it wasn't anything that we couldn't handle. I don't want any rules except for what me my friends and I decide on. I don't want any outside influences. I mean, anybody can open a squat. That's easy, you know? I mean, you just find an abandoned building, and there's so many different ways to get in, you know? If you want to be inside, you'll be inside. People just feel that they have to pay money for anything in this world. I mean, people are weird. They don't like to accept free things. I don't care if it's free. If I have to pay for it, well, I'll get it somehow. You know? People also look at those things as they give money over for a VCR. They're not giving just their money over, they're giving their lives over because they go to work every day for that money. They don't want to go to work, you know, because you hear them bitching, oh, it's early, I don't want to have to go, but they're doing it just so they can have some stupid, you know, box to stare at. Not me, man. Some squats, you open them one night and you know you might get 3 nights out of them. Some squats you open and you think you'll get 3 nights and you get a month and a half. I mean, I only got arrested once, and that was, I was in a squat, but it was not for squatting. They thought the squat was a heroin ring, and so they took like 12 males and 2 females down to 850 Bryant and booked, well, they not booked us, I guess. Yeah, they booked us, but they had to drop the charges because it was a bunch of bullshit. They were totally off. Government's stupid. They think they know what they're talking about. Like when cops come into a squat, they always ask who's the head person or whatever, who's the boss, I guess, the manager. And it's like, you are so far off, you do not even understand, man. You know, it's like, we are totally against any fucking authority over anyone, you know? And then they expect it, and it's like you tell them no one is, and they won't believe it. I don't see why they cannot comprehend that fact. And then they look at either the weirdest looking person, the person with the most piercings, whatever, and then for some reason they assume that is the boss or whoever.
How long have you been homeless?
Since I was 11.
How old are you now?
17.
How did you start being homeless?
Well, I kept running away, and then my mom just said basically, F you and don't come back.
And where have you usually stayed for the last 6 years?
Sometimes it was at relatives' houses, sometimes it's at friends. Most of the time I squat. Because I refuse to be part of the system. I refuse to go to a group home or a treatment program or something like that. So, you know, I choose this over the system.
Well, what's wrong with the system?
It's basically just fucked. You know, excuse my language, but it's not right.
If all the people in this country get together, we refuse to go to work, and we start refusing to do all this stuff, you let the rich man go down here to the store and he can't get his damn gasoline, he can't get the rest of his shit. I believe that it's time for the poor man and the middle class man to tell the rich man we're tired of your bullshit and start kicking their ass.
I don't think property matters shit when people are out in the rain.
You know, this is crazy. We can squat. Why are we paying this rent? And
I mean, that's ridiculous paying rent, you know, I mean.
Understand the difference between homesteading and squatting. I don't think people even know that one is in defiance, complete, total philosophical defiance of the law and will never bow down to the law, and the other yearns to become legal, to become part of the system. I think also, more catastrophically, is the use of the media. Squatters have no use for media and never will. The media is simply an extension of the ideological machine of capital. The media purports images of capital And I think squatting is in complete defiance of that. The only way we could actually use the media to our own benefit is to completely disavow the presence of corporate media and to make our own. And if we don't have the means of making our own documentation and archiving of our own experiences, then fuck it. It's not worth it. Better to get on with the act of actually gaining the houses and keeping them, and forget the false idea of trying to build mass support from the community via corporate television image making processes and devices. Politicians in the city, you know that there's a sense of complete nepotism. These people are absolutely corrupt bastards. To negotiate with them in any form or fashion is an absolute tactical and strategic abnegation of the very reason why people are trying to squat in the first place. These people will use any and all means through the aegis of San Francisco's bankrupt liberal tradition to appropriate squatting for their own political devices, to enhance their own careers as politicians in this city.
Well, if I'm going to wait for the government or the system to pull me out of this situation, I think I'm going to be homeless for the rest of my life.
We are taking over.